The Russian invaders still continue to focus their main efforts on the Kupiansk, Lyman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, and Marinka fronts. Heavy fighting is ongoing there. Source: Evening Report of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Facebook. Details: About 20 combat clashes took place on these fronts during the day. Today, the Russian occupiers launched yet another air and missile attack on the territory of Ukraine, using 17 Shahed attack drones and 1 anti-aircraft guided missile from the S-300 air defense system. As a result of the successful combat work of the defense forces of Ukraine, 16 Shahed drones were destroyed. In addition, the Russians carried out 43 airstrikes and launched 17 attacks from multiple launch rocket systems. At the same time, the Air Force of the Ukrainian Defense Forces delivered 13 strikes on areas of concentration of Russian personnel and 1 strike on a Russian anti-aircraft missile system during the day. Units of rocket forces and artillery hit Russian artillery in firing positions 9 times during the day. The operational situation on the Volyn and Politia fronts remains much the same as before. There is no evidence of Russia forming offensive units there. Units of Russian forces are undergoing training and coordination on training grounds in the Republic of Belarus before being deployed to fight in Ukraine. The Russians maintain a military presence on the Severshchina and Slobozhenshchina fronts. During the day, they carried out an airstrike on Radkivka, Sumy Oblast. They carried out mortar and artillery attacks on more than 15 settlements. On the Kupiansk front, Ukrainian soldiers are firmly holding the defense. Vorokna, Zapadna, Kamyanka, Kyslivka, Berestov and Fyholivka of Kharkiv Oblast were subjected to Russian artillery and mortar attacks. On the Lyman front, during the day, the Russians conducted unsuccessful offensives west of Dubrova of Luhansk Oblast and east of Novosadov of Donetsk Oblast. More than 10 settlements were hit by artillery fire. On the Bakhmut front, under heavy fire from Russian aircraft and artillery, Ukrainian defenders successfully repelled all Russian attacks in the vicinity of Berkhivka of Donetsk Oblast. More than 10 settlements were damaged by Russian artillery shelling. On the Avdiivka front, the Russians conducted unsuccessful offensive actions in the Pervomaysk area. They carried out airstrikes in the Avdiivka and Pervomaysk districts of Donetsk Oblast. At the same time, the Russians fired artillery at more than 10 settlements. On the Marinka front, the defense forces continue to hold back the advance of Russian troops in the area of Marinka. The Russians shelled more than 10 settlements. On the Shakhtarsk front, the Russians conducted unsuccessful offensive actions in the Novomykhailivka area of Donetsk Oblast. They shelled the settlements of Pereskoviivka, Novomykhailivka, Novokranka, Blahodatna, and Bowaavlenka. On the Zaporizhia and Kherson fronts, the Russians are concentrating their main efforts on preventing the further advance of Ukrainian troops. They carried out airstrikes in the areas of Mala-Tokhmachka, Zaporizhia Oblast, and Rozov, Kherson Oblast. They shelled more than 20 settlements. At the same time, the defense forces of Ukraine continue to conduct an offensive operation on the Melitopol and Berdyansk fronts, where gaining a foothold on the achieved borders, inflict artillery fire on identified Russian targets, and carry out counter-battery measures. Defense forces hold back Russian offensive near Marinka, General Staff. Ukrainian defenders are holding back the Russian offensive, in particular near Marinka, and are conducting a counter-offensive on the Melitopol and Berdyansk fronts. Source: General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Information is of 6 o'clock on the 15th of July. Quote, "Tonight, the Russian Federation launched another attack against Ukraine, using Iranian-made Shahed-136 131st attack UAVs and anti-aircraft guided missiles. Information about the consequences of this terrorist attack is currently being clarified. Details: During the past day, Russian occupiers struck the territory of Ukraine, using 17 Iranian-made Shahed drones and 1 S-300 anti-aircraft guided missile. As a result of the successful combat work of the defense forces of Ukraine, 16 Shahed drones were destroyed. In addition, the Russians carried out 50 airstrikes and launched 43 attacks from multiple launch rocket systems. Russian invaders still continue to focus their main efforts on the Kupiansk, Lyman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Marinka fronts. Heavy fighting is ongoing there. 32 combat clashes took place on these fronts during the day. On the Severshchina and Slobozhenshchina fronts, the Russians carried out an airstrike on Radkivka, Sumy Oblast. They carried out mortar and artillery attacks on more than 15 settlements, including Karpovichi and Kamyn in Chernihiv Oblast, Bilikopito, Maleshine and Boyaro-Lezachi in Sumy Oblast, and Kazaka Lopan, Neskuchny, Morokovets and Ternova in Kharkiv Oblast. On the Kupiansk front, Ukrainian soldiers are holding the defense. Vorokna, Zapadna, Kamyanka, Kyslivka, Berestov and Fyholivka in Kharkiv Oblast were subjected to Russian artillery and mortar attacks. On the Lyman front, during the day, the Russians conducted unsuccessful offensives west of Dubrova in Luhansk Oblast and east of Novosadov in Donetsk Oblast. Russian invaders launched airstrikes in the areas of Nevsky and Bilohorivka in Luhansk Oblast and Spern, Fedorivka and Vesel in Donetsk Oblast. More than 15 settlements, including Nevsky and Bilohorivka in Luhansk Oblast and Torsky, Verkhnyokamyansk, Spern and Rozdolivka in Donetsk Oblast, came under Russian artillery fire. On the Bakhmut front, under heavy fire from Russian aircraft and artillery, Ukrainian defenders successfully repelled all Russian attacks near Berkhivka in Donetsk Oblast. The Russians launched airstrikes near Stupochki and Avdiivka. More than 15 settlements were targeted by Russian artillery shelling, including Druzhba, Vashukivka, Chasev Yar, Oleksandro Shultin, Avdiivka, Pivnikny and Pivden in Donetsk Oblast. On the Avdiivka front, the Russians conducted unsuccessful offensive actions in the vicinity of Pervomaysk. They carried out airstrikes in the areas of Avdiivka and Pervomaysk. At the same time, the Russians fired artillery at more than 10 settlements, including Berdichi, Karamek, Lastochkin and Avdiivka in Donetsk Oblast. On the Marinka front, the defense forces continue to hold back the advance of Russian troops in the area of Marinka. The Russians shelled more than 15 settlements, including Krasnohorivka, Marinka, Pobeda and Hyorhivka in Donetsk Oblast. On the Shakhtarsk front, the Russians conducted unsuccessful offensive actions in the Novomykhailivka area in Donetsk Oblast. They shelled the settlements of Paraskoviivka, Novomykhailivka, Makarivka, Novokranka, Blahodatna and Bowaavlenka. On the Zaporizhia and Kherson fronts, the Russians are concentrating their main efforts on preventing the further advance of Ukrainian troops. They carried out airstrikes in the areas of Mala Tokhmichka in Zaporizhia Oblast, and Rozov in Kherson Oblast. They deployed artillery to attack more than 25 settlements, including Viln Pol, Mala Tokhmichka, Huliaipol, Zaliznikny and Bilahiria in Zaporizhia Oblast, Antonivka, Tyainka, Chornobaivka, Mykilsky and Kizimys in Kherson Oblast, and the city of Kherson. The General Staff of Ukraine's Armed Forces reported on July 15 that Russia has lost 237,180 troops in Ukraine since the beginning of its full-scale invasion in February 2022, with an estimated 590 casualties on July 14.